Coming up on Network Africa, millions of Tanzanians vote in the general election with social media sites reported to be restricted. South Africa's president self-quarantines after attending a dinner where a guest tested positive for COVID-19. Plus, the United Nations Human Rights Commission condemns the killings of school children in the Anglophone region of Cameroon. Thank you for joining us on the program. Welcome. I'm Layo Adigoke. Citizens in Tanzania are voting in a general election for a new president following nationwide reports of restricted internet access plus the arrest of an opposition leader in Zanzibar. The fight for the seat of power is majorly between President John Magufuli, whose CCM party has governed Tanzania for decades and who is also seeking a second term in office, and Tundu Lissu, of the biggest opposition party, Chadema, who survived an assassination attempt 3 years ago. Chadema returned from Belgium in July, where he had undergone rounds of treatment for gunshot wounds. Now, in all, 15 candidates are running for president, including former Foreign Minister Bernard Mbembe, an ex-colleague turned critic of Mr. Magufuli, who defected from the ruling party. The results of the presidential election and parliamentary elections are expected to be announced within a week. Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Office has called on all relevant actors in Tanzania to ensure that the elections are held in a peaceful, inclusive and participatory manner. Spokesperson for the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ravina Shamdasani, says people must be able to cast their votes free of fear and intimidation.
We have been following with concern the shrinking of democratic space in the country, with worrying reports of intimidation, harassment, arbitrary arrests, and physical attacks against political opponents, journalists, women human rights defenders, and other activists. This repression of dissenting voices intensified in the lead up to the elections, when the right to freedom of expression and political participation should be upheld, not repressed. The elections take place tomorrow. We are particularly alarmed by reports that 3 people were reportedly killed last night and others injured on Pemba Island in the Zanzibar archipelago, where police fired live ammunition in clashes with opposition supporters. We urge the authorities to ensure that prompt, transparent, independent investigations are carried out into the incident, and we urge all actors to refrain from any acts of violence. We call on all relevant actors to ensure that the elections take place in a peaceful, inclusive, and participatory manner, with people being able to cast their votes free of fear and intimidation.
On Saturday, the 31st of October, Côte d'Ivoire would be heading to the polls, but there are fears the election could turn violent. President Alassane Ouattara is running for a controversial third term, and this has sparked outrage, especially among his critics. Residents of the biggest city, Abidjan, are stocking up on provisions, and some are even leaving to the hinterland villages ahead of the contentious presidential race.
It's an unusually busy day at this bus station in Abidjan. Many residents are leaving the city as the election approaches. Ines Bahi says she feels safer leaving the capital as political tensions rise. She's remembering 10 years ago when a brief post-electoral conflict killed 3,000 people and trapped the residents of Abidjan between warring factions for weeks.
Because of the situation in the country with the elections approaching, we don't know what is going to happen, so we are scared, and that's why we decided to get out.
Others were more philosophical, remembering that fighting was not just confined to Abidjan back in 2010 and 2011.
For me, there is no reason to flee. Whatever the situation, it is an election, and what will happen will happen. And we can't just run away from danger, because by fleeing, you might just end up facing danger over there where you're going.
Many Ivorians had hoped the 2020 election would see the country turn the page on a cycle of violence around elections and see President Alassane Ouattara transfer power to a new generation. Instead, ahead of the vote, citizens of the relatively prosperous but volatile West African nation of 25 million people face a familiar set of choices and fears. After initially saying he wouldn't stand for a third term, President Ouattara, 78-year-old President Ouattara, reversed course when his preferred successor died unexpectedly in July, leaving the ruling party with no other obvious standard-bearer. His two main challengers are veteran of Ivory Coast's main crisis since the 1990s, the 86-year-old former president, Henri Konan Bedie, and 67-year-old Pascal Affi-N'Guesson, a prime minister under President Ouattara's predecessor, Laurent Gbagbo. In the streets, young and old are saying they want a modern political state with new leaders that can thrust the country forward. Yet, on Tuesday, less than half of the voters had picked up their electoral cards.
The European Union says that although voting in Guinea was calm, questions remain as to the credibility of the results. It says it had taken note of the provincial results that announced President Alpha Conde's win. Now, the EU also says it supports the diplomacy efforts by West Africa's regional bloc, ECOWAS, and the African Union and the UN to restore confidence. A delegation of mediators is in the country and has met various political actors, including opposition leader Cellou Dalein Diallo, who has been prevented from leaving his house. There have been clashes between opposition supporters and security forces across the nation since the opposition leader declared himself winner. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is in self-quarantine. A statement from the presidency confirmed that he had to do that after a guest at a dinner he attended on Saturday tested positive for COVID-19. It also adds that Mr. Ramaphosa is showing no symptoms at this time and will, in line with COVID-19 health protocols, be tested should symptoms surface. The fundraising dinner, hosted by the Adopt a School Foundation, was attended by 35 guests at a hotel in commercial hub of Johannesburg. Mr. Ramaphosa is the latest world leader forced to self-quarantine because of the outbreak. Well, our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, joins us now for more details on this. Thank you, Betty, for speaking to us. What more can you tell us about this? How is the president doing?
Well, the president seems to be okay so far. I know yesterday he unveiled a statue of ANC stalwart, struggle stalwart OR Tambo at the OR Tambo International Airport. There's one within the airport, and then this particular one is outside. He did that, and then he commissioned or cut the tape for an international hotel around the airport as well. But he's okay today. I know he joined remotely the presentation of the midterm budget policy statement by the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, in Parliament. So he wasn't there, but I saw him via Zoom also joining in to watch that presentation. Ordinarily, he would probably have been inside the chamber of the Parliament for that presentation.
That means he's still performing his duties even as he is in quarantine.
Yes, he is performing his duties. Remember, since the COVID time and the lockdown, the bulk of what he's been doing has been virtual. All the international meetings, many of them, if not all, have been virtual, and he's been doing that, joining in. And as AU chairman, the meetings of the AU leaders and all that, or the SADC leaders, has been doing that. So nothing much has really changed. but the ones that he attends physically will be on break for now, for the few days as they observe him to see if he will show symptoms. As you read a few seconds ago, he's not showing any symptoms for now, but we know that the president is tested regularly by the military hospital that attends to mostly presidents, and he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So if anything happens, it will be made public. And I know contact tracing is quite huge here. So places that he's been after that, they will let the people know, as they did for this Dr. School Foundation and the Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation dinner event that had 35 guests.
Yeah, and South Africa has reported the highest number of COVID-19 cases in Africa. Now, with this latest on the president, are there fears of going back to a lockdown? Is there any response from the authorities concerning this?
Well, we have to make it clear the president is not COVID positive yet. He is not. So it's still the same risk that everybody is facing. But the president has rubbished all the, well, he called them alarmists, people saying that there's a likelihood that the country will go back to a hard lockdown, probably not level 5, but maybe level 3. Under level 3, alcohol wasn't allowed, and that was a huge fight in the country. But he said that if at the rate that things are going, if there is a need, he'll be the one to tell the country. The numbers are still high. You have 19,053 deaths so far, and recovery rate is still about 90%. So he's saying that people still need to be careful. There's a lot of carelessness, there's a lot of irresponsibility. And as one of the premiers, the premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Sikle Zikalala, said, you would swear there was no COVID because many people are gathering in groups, many people are forgetting the health safety protocol, wearing masks, social distancing and the like. So the appeal is still going out from the president and all other officials to let people know that COVID is still here. We need to be responsible. But if the so-called second wave comes, they may have to not necessarily go back to a hard lockdown, as some of the officials have said, but maybe take a few measures to be a bit more stringent than we are now under level 1 lockdown.
Indeed, we all need to be careful and more responsible. Thank you so much, Betty Dibia, our South Africa Bureau Chief. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Well, Algeria's President Abdelmadjid Tebboune has been admitted to a military hospital in the capital just days before the country is due to vote in an important constitutional referendum. On Saturday, Mr. Tebboune went into 5 days of voluntary self-isolation at the advice of his doctors after many of his aides and government figures tested positive for coronavirus. Mr. Tebboune's office said that he was in a stable condition in a specialist unit and that he continues to do his work. Algerians will be voting in Sunday's referendum on an amendment to the constitution that limits presidential terms and gives more powers to the parliament and judiciary. The UN Human Rights Office has strongly condemned Saturday's shooting of school children in the Anglophone region of Cameroon. Spokesperson for OHCHR, Ravina Shamdasani, says the attack on educational facilities constitutes serious violations of international law and that the perpetrators must be held accountable.
We strongly condemn the attack. The killing and the maiming of children, as well as attacks on educational facilities, constitute serious violations of international law, and the perpetrators must be held accountable with due regard for international human rights standards. We remind the authorities of their obligation to protect access to education. We've also received numerous other reports of serious human rights violations and abuses by separatist groups and by security forces. Difficulties in accessing the affected areas makes it very hard to verify the reports, including reports of extrajudicial executions, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, and abductions. We have urged the Cameroonian authorities to ensure independent and impartial investigation and prosecution of all serious violations and abuses, including acts of gender-based violence. by state and non-state actors. We've also called on them to ensure the right to a remedy for victims, including by guaranteeing their access to justice and reparations. We stress the urgent need for an inclusive dialogue to carve out a durable resolution to this crisis.
Still to come on Network Africa. New developments is springing up at Egypt's historical pyramids plateau to attract more tourists. We'll give you more details. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. 1 week after the shootings at Lekki Toll Plaza, the controversy over the incident is still raging as human rights group Amnesty International is calling on the federal government of Nigeria to bring to justice those behind the shooting incident. The rights group, in its second report on the incident, is also saying the government must stop attempts to cover up the incident. In its latest report, which details a timeline of events from when the End SARS protests started on October 8th, the group says based on its investigations, the peaceful protests had been peaceful until they were met by excessive use of force by the army and the police. According to Amnesty, things came to a head on October 20 after peaceful protesters were reportedly shot dead when the Nigerian army opened fire on them at the Lekki toll gate. The group says its on-the-ground investigation confirmed that 12 persons were killed at the Alausa and Lekki venues of the protests by the Nigerian army and police. Specifically for Lekki, Amnesty says it is in possession of a video which details the movement of the military from Boni camp, passing along Ozumbambadi Way and several foreign embassies and consulates before arriving at the Lekki Toll Plaza where the shootings occurred. Amnesty says the entire journey lasted 7 minutes and clearly shows the vehicles which appear to be the ones used by the Nigerian military and police. Nigeria's former finance minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has received a key endorsement from the World Trade Organization Selection Committee. The panel of 3 senior WTO ambassadors say she polled 104 votes from 164 member countries. If she emerges winner, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala will become the first African and woman to head the intergovernmental body. The former managing director of the World Bank also has a crucial backing from the European Union. Now, an official announcement is expected to be made later next week. A community-based organization in South Sudan, which promotes girls' education, is enlightening local communities on the importance of avoiding early marriages for girls. Local communities in Yambio, Western Equatoria, recently watched a newly released film titled Stop Underage Marriage in South Sudan that addresses conflict-related sexual violence, which is a common occurrence in the world's youngest country.
The movie screening of Stop Underage Marriage in South Sudan hopes to educate citizens on the need to let go of cultural practices such as forcing girls to marry when they are very young and instead prioritize their education. Community members attending the screening were visibly moved by the film and its strong message.
This is a good lesson for families, our communities, fathers, mothers, and even the girls, so that we can know how to stand up for them to get a good education, which will in turn give them a better life, because they are the future of our country.
The film is produced by the Community Organization for Peace and Development, a community-based organization which promotes girls' education.
We have seen a lot of dropout girls in Western Equatoria and in South Sudan at large. You see some of the young girls are being impregnated. They drop out from school at the early age of in P5. Some of them, they are not even reaching the secondary school. And with this, I have sought and said no.
UNMISS staff from the mission's Yambayo field office also attend the screening.
Protection of children is a collective responsibility. The best place for the child is the home, and the next one is the school. This is where children are being brought up, are being built to become a responsible citizen and law-abiding of this country.
The movie is a first in the history of the Western Equatoria to boldly and sensitively advocate for the right of every girl to be educated and be economically independent.
Well, Egypt is developing its historical pyramids plateau to attract more tourists as it continues to boost its revenue after a hiatus caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. For the first time, dining and electric cars are being made available with the help of the private sector to make foreigners enjoy their stay.
A first-ever restaurant and a set of eco-friendly electric buses are the latest developments to Egypt's Giza Pyramids Plateau. The $19 million project is part of a greater plan to develop tourist-friendly amenities and services at the ancient site. Naguib Sawiris is the business tycoon whose company is the main developer.
Finally made a tourist happy, because you all are aware of the nasty stories with the camel people, the donkeys and the alien. The horses.
Dubbed the Nine Pyramids Lounge, the new restaurant is 1,341 square meters large and overlooks the Pyramids complex. The Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, Khalid El Anani, says the new project also includes the deployment of 30 environment-friendly electronic buses equipped with screens that act as tour guides.
Guests will leave their cars outside, and tourist buses will leave their vehicles outside, a large parking space. Guests will come and find a large set of ticket windows where they can pay electronically or by cash. For those who cannot pay electronically, temporarily, they will ride electric buses.
New regulations will also be imposed on vendors and workers offering camel and horse rides. Vendors will not be allowed to directly deal with tourists regarding payments. Instead, tourists will present electronic tickets to licensed workers.
We will organize the salespeople. We will not deprive them of their income, but we will put them into suitable, nice places. We will try as much as possible to avoid any financial interaction between the horses or the camels and the tourists. The tourist will have his electronic ticket.
The changes are part of a larger project to develop the tourist destination, which were in the works before the industry took a hit with the coronavirus pandemic. Tourism accounts for up to 15% of Egypt's national output, and officials have said previously that it was losing around $1 billion each month after the sector shut down most of its activities in March.
And that's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.